General George Washington, commander of the Continental troops, placed his full faith and trust on this young patriot's shoulders, appointing him as aide-de-camp.
I, Alexander Hamilton, Lieutenant Colonel and aide-de-camp to His Excellency, the Commander-in-Chief, do acknowledge the United States of America to be free, independent, and sovereign states, and declare that the people thereof owe no allegiance or obedience to George III, King of Great Britain. And I renounce, refuse, and abjure any allegiance or obedience to him. And I do swear that I will, to the utmost of my power, support, maintain, and defend the said United States against the said King George III.
But from his position in the leadership of the revolutionary forces, Hamilton would bear witness to the terrible conditions of the soldiers and the pathetic lack of the ability of the Continental Congress to organize the material support for victory. Always forced to borrow and depend on loans to purchase ammunition and supplies, the Congress was never able to fully arm or clothe its troops. However, despite these failures, through miracles of strategy and through leadership, Washington secured a hard-fought victory, defeating the British forces and driving the occupation from our shores. But the crippling failures of government remained. By 1783, even at the moment the final treaty of victory was secured, the new nation was already suffering under the Articles of Confederation. With no power of taxation granted to the Congress, the nation's revenue was drying up. The value of currency was dropping, and foreign loans, which the nation was depending on to survive, were becoming increasingly difficult to secure. Hamilton saw clearly where the failure lay. The states were not recognized as a unity, and the leaders had no authority to operate as one. The Continental Congress, in writing the Articles of Confederation, had left out the needed powers to govern, and instead maintained a loosely confederated collection of states, which was a mere leftover of the informal alliances which had already existed between the pre-war colonies. Alexander Hamilton became the most vocal proponent of a new federal constitution, channeling all of the vigor he had used to organize support for the cause of liberty in preparation for war, and applying it to the framing of a new government that would have all the powers requisite to preserve its hard-won republic. Hamilton asserted that the want of power suffered by Congress would be solved by making the economic system inextricably bound to the function of government. However, the wealth of the American system would not be dependent on the accumulation of money as value, as had been the case with the British system that we had fought so hard to break from, but with the aim of developing the mind of the citizen. Therefore, the preamble of the Constitution was written as the statement of intention that government would be established to provide for the common defense and to promote the general welfare of the people, and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution was included to supply the basis for the mechanism by which that intention were carried out.
On the foundation of that incorporation and union, I seek to erect a mass of credit that will supply the defect of moneyed capitals and answer all the purposes of cash. A plan which will offer adventurers immediate advantages analogous to those they receive by employing their money in trade, and eventually greater advantages. A plan which will give them their greatest security. To not only advance their own interests and secure the independence of their country, but in its progress have the most beneficial influence upon its future commerce and be a source of national strength and wealth. I mean the institution of a national bank.
With the new nation in the state of national bankruptcy, Hamilton, who was soon to be Treasury Secretary of the newborn republic, planned out how he would conduct the nation's first bankruptcy reorganization. Each state had incurred its own debt to fund the war, a national total of over $4.5 million. Managing this, while retaining commitments to other loans, interest, and maintaining a continuity of services and expenses for local government, proved to be an insurmountable burden for any individual state. During the war, the challenge had been to get each state to send money to Congress. But now, in peacetime, with each state attempting to collect money to pay its own debt, the states were struggling to survive. This was the test, to prove the validity of our founding ideals. Hamilton needed to reorganize the debt, transferring all the obligations from each individual state to the federal government. Creating the mass of credit necessary for the establishment of the bank would put the nation as a whole, rather than each individual state, in debt. This would be a driver to organize the finances of the nation as a single unity. Under the newly ratified federal constitution, Congress was empowered with the sole authority to approve future financing for productive projects, incurring a new debt which would then be monetized by the Treasury and sent to the National Bank for application and activation. Thus, large amounts of capital for industry and trade would become available through the first national bank, using a currency that was established with the purpose of supporting development, rather than as a simple medium for exchange.
A national debt, if it is not excessive, will be to us a national blessing. It will be a powerful cement of our union.
Finally, on September 17, 1787, 12 long years after the first shots were fired in Lexington, and a full 6 years after the end of the war at Yorktown, the United States Federal Constitution was ratified and signed. Hamilton, the hero of Yorktown, had completed the mission of the Revolution. Independence existed now not in name only, but in reality. True independence, politically and economically, from the ancient empire of money and trade which had oppressed mankind for millennia. However, though independence had finally been won, the empire still existed. Ours was an embattled republic, struggling to survive in a divided world, still infected by evil. As Franklin said, a republic, only if we can keep it.
Therefore, look, the point is, the United States has to have the guts to declare the Federal Reserve System bankrupt. That's the way to get at it. It is bankrupt. And let it prove that it has assets to cover this utterance. If not, we put it into bankruptcy. What we do is we simply get rid of it by bankruptcy. Just take it off the books. It's bankrupt. It took itself off the books by going bankrupt. Easiest way of skinning that cat. Right, now, then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to develop the third national bank of the United States. And what we will do with that is it is essentially assigned to the Treasury, but it's not an extension of the Treasury otherwise. It has a relationship to the Treasury by being authorized. But a third national bank, exactly as Hamilton prescribed in the first national bank. And we will take a little carefully guarded, barbed wire, etc. thing, down to the basement of the third national bank, and inside will be the remains of the Federal Reserve System, held in captivity for purposes of audit only.
So we'll give Ben Bernanke a quiet early retirement. Qualified regional governors of the Federal Reserve will be employed under the new system and retain many of their current responsibilities. Trillions of dollars of illegitimate debt will be completely and finally wiped off the books, and under the Third National Bank, we will produce waves of federally directed credit to fund national infrastructure projects and spur the recovery that our nation so desperately needs. Today, we have an opportunity like none humanity has ever faced before. Globalization, that imperial monetary system, has by far overreached its bounds and has now cannibalized everything on which it depends to survive. The era in which two opposing systems can continue to exist together on this planet is over. We are presented with the possibility of a future in which empire is a thing of the past, cast into the wastebasket of history, a future towards which Hamilton made a crucial step, but of which he could only dream. In fact, our continued survival depends on our choice whether or not to finally eliminate that system of monetarism from the face of the planet, once and for all, never to be seen again. Today, what's needed to save our nation is the same kind of upsurge of patriotism, a revival of that spirit which gave birth to our revolutionary republic, the spirit which drives our people to spit in the face of traitors and to say, "We are Americans. Treason makes us sick." That is the true principle of patriotism which will put the United States on the path towards the creation of a new Hamiltonian world credit system, a system never before seen in the history of the human race.